All right, so we're continuing on from last week. Go ahead and make a, go ahead and say save as, and we'll call this Touch Overview Part 2. Okay, that way you can keep your old file separate from what we're going to add today. Not sure that that's necessary, but let's just do it anyway. Okay, so let's see. Did we talk about parameter modes? I think I briefly touched on it at the end, but we didn't go into depth. But there are, let's see, the output of each operator. Yeah, so the output of each operator is affected by its inputs, its parameters, and in some cases, the current time. And each one of these parameters have different modes. So let's see. Let's make a circle top to demonstrate this. Top, so you can double click on a blank piece of canvas, or you can hit the tab key and then hit tab or until you get to tops, or click on the top tab and then go to circle. And you can, if you start typing, you can narrow down which objects are there. All right, so this is a circle top texture operator, meaning this is a two-dimensional circle. If I were to rotate this, you wouldn't, there is no rotation. I mean, I can rotate it around this way. You wouldn't be able to tell because it's a circle. But it's completely flat, right? Let's look at the different parameters. All right, so the main parameter here on the circle, the main two parameters, I would say, there's lots of parameters, but the main ones you'd probably interface with are the radius parameter, which has to do with the shape and size of the circle, and the fill color, which is what color it is. So go ahead and click on the plus next to radius, and you see that expands it out into these into the subparameters of radius x and radius y. So that's its radius on x and the y scale, and you don't have to have them be the same. I can have this be 0.7 on the x and 0.2 on the y, and now it's like a major ellipse. Actually, let's make it so it fits in that thing a little bit nicer. Let's make it 0.4 and 0.2. There. Now it's an ellipse, right? Those, so far, most of what we've been doing in parameter modes, so these are the three, so this is a parameter, right? Radius, x. This is another parameter, radius, y. This name, radius x and radius y, that's how you would reference that parameter if you were going to change it in Python, or yeah, if you're going to have an expression about it in Python, and that could happen either in this particular operator, or it could happen in a different operator that's changing the parameter of this operator. We'll look at that more when we go more into Python manipulation. But for now, yeah, that's the name of it, radius x and radius y. This is the type of parameter is a float. You guys know the difference between a float and an integer? What's the difference? Somebody tell me, what's the difference between a float and an integer?
Decimal points.
Yeah, exactly. So if you see a decimal point, that's a float. Even if there's nothing after the decimal point, it's a float. If and any value between 0 and 1, or between 1 and 2, like 1.37, that's a float, floating point value. Integers are all whole numbers, right? So these are both floats, and right now we're using the constant parameter mode. That's the simplest mode, and it's just you set the number and the thing changes to what you set and doesn't change after that. Okay? The other modes here are expression mode, which is this blue box, and And the green box is export mode. And it's right now it says export not found because we haven't exported something to it. And we'll look at that in a minute. We will be doing chop exports later. And also you'll notice that this export mode is green because that's implying that you're using a chop to that mode, and chops are all green, right? So you can have expressions here. The expression can be a simple like math expression. So I could say, man, I don't know. I don't know what value I should do, but I want it to be like 1/4 of the size it is now. And I could say this, well, the size it is now divided by 4. And now it's 1/4 of the size it was, right? And that's just a simple math operation. And if I you can see what it returned is 0.1, right? So that's the evaluation of this expression, of 0.04 divided by 4 equals 0.01. That's a simple expression. It doesn't. I mean, you could say that that's also Python code. Doesn't have any real Python functions that you couldn't do outside of Python. Yeah, you can also put Python expressions here. Like one of them would be, well, let's see. Let's leave it alone where it is now. So make sure you do have an oblong shaped or a ellipse shaped circle. That way when we rotate it, you can tell that it's rotating. And say I want to, and oh, notice the next type, the other type of data value here, an integer, right? Look at the rotate. Those are all integer values, and they're expressing degrees of rotation, right? You can still actually use floating point values here. I can say 241.4. You probably won't notice much difference between that and a whole value, but mostly these are integers, right? So we have floating point values, we have integers. You can also put, if I expand this by hitting the plus button here, so that we get to the sub parameter, I can put in a Python expression here for this rotation, and I'm going to say, let's see, abs, ABS, and then capital T time, ABS time dot seconds. And now it is rotating very, very slowly. Okay, so that's not fast enough. So let's say ABS times seconds times 5. And now it's rotating a little bit faster. Or I could say times 10. And now it's rotating even faster. Or if seconds is just not going very often, I could change this to dot frame. Is it frames or frame? We'll figure it out. No, it's frame. And now there's 600 frames every second, and so now it's rotating much faster. Right? So that's a Python expression. Pretty much all expressions are Python expressions. They might just be simple math operations, or they may be Python keywords like this. Okay, so what other types of parameters are there? Let's see. So we talked about integers. We talked about floating point numbers. Oh, other types are like toggles. Like in this case, a toggle here would be this polygon. Right now it's set to off. If I change that to on, then it simplifies it to a polygon, which with number of sides set by this slider down here. So the smallest number of sides you can have on a circle is 3, and it turns into a triangle. I can change that to more, and you can make it into various sided shapes. Does that change its radius so that it can't have a different y and x? It looks like it does. 0.8. 0.1. So yeah, it looks like if you have it in polygon mode, you can't have it you can't have the shape be like wider than it is tall. It's going to be uniform in its scaling. But if you turn that off, you can have it be wider than it is tall. Okay, so that is a toggle. There's also in your parameters. There's sometimes there's menus. So like an example of that is I can say, okay, this drop-down menu, I can change the where the center of rotation is. I can set that in pixels. I can set that as a fraction that goes between 0 and 1, or a fraction with aspect ratio kept. So if I change this to fraction and I change the center to 0.25 on the X, then it moved it over. I thought that would change like where its rotation pinning is, but I guess not. Negative 0.25. I guess that's just kind of moving it. All right, fine. Okay, let's see. Menus we talked about. You can also have in particular objects like a text string, especially if you're going to have a text object. So your parameter might be a text string. Let's look at that real quick. A text top. Text. Derivative. So here's this is an example of a string parameter. It's derivative. I can set this to whatever I want. Hello world. And I'll change that to hello world, right? Other types of parameters, the path to another node. If you were, for example, do it using a select top. Select, why won't you work? I got to click up here, I guess. Select, there it is. Then this is a path parameter, and it's asking me what top do I want to have this be the selection of, and I can type that out. I can drag something on it. I'm going to send it null 1, and now it's created an association between these two, and it's essentially sent the signal that's coming out of null 1, sends it to select without having to draw a wire. Why would you do that? Usually you would do that if you had it inside of a different component or someplace really far away in your patch and you just don't want wires going everywhere. It's kind of like a send and receive in Max or send and receive in Isadora. Okay, so that's a select. And then pulses also are another type of parameter. Go to make a chop and choose the chop that's called trigger. And if you click the pulse down here, that's a parameter and it triggers this chop to do what it does, which it creates a ramp that goes up and goes back down. Currently it's set on ease in and ease out. If you wanted this to just be a linear, I could change that to linear on the attack, linear on the sustain, and linear on the release. And now if I go back to trigger and I click on pulse, it just goes up and down without having that acceleration and deceleration. Right? So that's a pulse parameter. You'll see pulse parameters on pretty much any object that triggers off of an input of some sort. So you see it a lot on the trigger, obviously. You also see it on like audio files to tell, or video files to tell them to play or to reset their position back to the beginning. Those are often triggered by pulse parameters. Any questions on this so far? Okay. So yeah, each parameter may only have one, but it can also have 2, 3, or 4 values. Those were those subparameters I was talking about. Go back to your circle top and click on on the plus next to fill color, and you can see that this fill color is comprised of 3 different subparameters or values here, and that's the red color, the blue color, and the green color. And then also, that's weird. No, I just said it wrong. Never mind, that's not weird. Yeah, red color, green color, and blue color. And then also you could, usually you would think of color as also including the alpha. Right below that is another parameter of alpha, which kind of makes the 4th value of the color. So if I wanted this to be red, I could change the green color to 0 and the green color to 0 and the blue color to 0, and now it's red. Okay, and we talked about parameter modes. We talked about constant expression mode and export. We need to export some stuff. All right, so if you're going to do, so there's basically 2 ways you can make animations or make things move in TouchDesigner. You can either animate them through expressions like we're doing here with the rotate, or you can also use a chop like this trigger and have that make things move, and that's called an export. That's what I mentioned a minute ago. So if, for example, I wanted to make this circle, let's see, does this have, can I offset it? Well, we could offset it. How did we do it? We did it with the center X and Y, right? Yeah. So if I wanted this circle to like go to the left and then come back, or go to the right and come back, I could export the output of this, trigger 1, to the center X over here. Right? So let's go ahead and move this trigger 1 to the right of the circle, just to make this a little easier. And there's a couple ways you can export. One of the easiest ways is to click on Viewer Active on the chop that you want to export, and make sure you have the object that you want to export to highlighted, this circle 1 that highlighted, and you have your parameters open over here. If you lose your parameter window and you're like, oh my God, I can't find it, nothing's working, it's because you probably accidentally hit the P key. You can always hit the P key to bring up parameters. All right, so I want to export this value to the center X on this. I can grab just this green, the center of the trigger object here, and drag it over to the parameter that I want to export it to, and then you'll see that plus, and then it'll bring up a context menu, and you can choose Export Chop out of the context menu. And now that has been exported to that center X. And if I now turn off my Viewer Active and highlight this trigger and I click the pulse, you can see the red circle jump to the right. Okay. So yeah, chops, and this is all happening because the chop is exporting the numbers that are coming out of it, right? When I hit the trigger, the pulse, you can see that number climbing up, and it's going between 0 and 1 and back down to 0 again, and it's creating pulses. I mean floats. So yeah, chops are all numbers. They output numbers. They create 1 or more channels of numbers. And let's see. Let's make a new chop and make one called constant. And you can, if you want to change the constant the value that's in the constant chop, you can grab this slider over here and move it around. By default, it only has one channel, but you can have as many channels as you want in a constant chop. So if I wanted to add channels, I could click below this and type in what I want to call the next channel, chan 2, right? I could even call that something different or weird, like banana. It doesn't care, right? So now I have one channel called chan1 and another channel called banana. Go ahead and get rid of banana or anything else you put there. Let me show you a shortcut. You usually want to just name them chan1 through chan whatever, however many, because otherwise you'll get confused about what they do or what they are. There's a shortcut where I can say chan, get rid of the 1 and say open bracket 1 through 5, close bracket. And if I hit return, then now I have 5 channels that are named automatically chan1 through chan5. Except for they all run together. Okay. So they showed me that in the help thing, but they didn't tell me that they would all work independently. So I guess if you wanted to set them all independently, I would want to go just do chan1. Let's just make 3. Chan1, chan2, and chan3. Now I can set each of these independently, right? And say I want to export these to, what would be a good thing to export these 3 values to on this circle? Anyone? Anyone? Bueller? No? All right. The color, right? 3 values, red, green, blue. That's the first one that comes to mind for me. So I can, on these, let's see, click on make the viewer active, make sure I have my circle highlighted, and now I can grab each one of these as I hover over it. I can export it to wherever I want. So I'm going to do the first one to color R, and then choose export chop. Second one to color green, export chop. Third one to color blue, export chop. And now if I take off the viewer active on this, I can drag these around and have a color slider that will change the color of that circle.
Is viewer active kind of like blocking the screen?
It allows you to interface with that object. It allows you to export the it does a couple, viewer active does a couple different things depending on what the operator is. So in chops, yeah, it allows you to send that value somewhere else. In comps, especially like user interface comps like a slider, it allows you to actually grab and move the slider. Whereas otherwise you're just repositioning the operator on the network canvas, right? There was another one, but it just slipped. In SOPs, actually, just go back up here and go inside your geometry component really quick. In SOPs, if I, on this torus here, if I make my viewer active, I can inspect this torus from different views. You'll notice, though, that when I'm doing this, like if I do it with the ghost here, it's not going to change what is outputted from that, right? It's just for looking at it in this particular operator. It doesn't change the rotation on the output of the operator. All right. Any other questions? All right. So we've now exported these to, we've exported chops to parameters in other objects, in this case in a top, circle top, right? You can turn off export. This is the export flag. So once you export that chop, automatically the export flag will turn on the chop that you exported from. If I turn it off, it'll go back to whatever was set in the constant on that object. So it's a way of like turning it on quickly and turning it off. Okay, let's make a noise chop. Okay, this is one channel that has multiple samples. If you want to see the samples, each one of these has 600 samples. If I zoom in on it and I right click and I go to, what? That didn't work. Hold on. Maybe I have to, I have to turn on viewer active. Turn on viewer active, right click on it, and now it'll bring up this context menu, and I can change this to show a dot per sample, and then zoom in all the way. You can see these little dots. Each one of these dots is a sample, right? Wow, that looks better on the projector. It looks all weird on my screen. But yeah, each one of these dots is a different value, right? There's 600 of them in, as you can see, it goes from 0 to 600 here. If you want to see these as numbers, you can actually output this to a DAT. So go ahead and make a new object and go over to DATs and use the chop2. Okay, and then it'll ask you, hey, what chop do you want here? If you don't put anything, it won't display anything. We're going to put noise 2, the name of this chop over here. I'm going to put that in there, noise 2. Or I could have exported it, right? I can grab this. Whoops. When the viewer is not active, I can grab this and put it over here, and you'll see that plus object, and that would have done the same thing. And now I get all 600 samples. You see, if I make the viewer active on a DAT, it allows me to scroll up and down so I can see all these values. And if I scroll down, you can see it goes from 0 to 599, right? Because it uses 0 registration. So there's 600 samples there, but it starts with sample 0 and goes up to sample 599. And it gives me that many random numbers. Okay. Go ahead and press the H key, get back home. And we already did that. We already did that. All right.
What's the practical use of noise?
So usually it would be, it's to get a random sample. And how would you get that output? It's usually in, let's see, isn't it in, it's for creating these things. So you could get the values by using a chop2 is one way you could get to them. You can change the type of noise to different types. We'll give you different types of random numbers. Maybe random numbers that are based on the previous random number, completely random numbers like this. Sparse is the default, which it is more of a drunk walk. It's either going to be going up or down. But you can call these, I'm trying to remember how. Often there's not on this. Often, like, okay, so another example of a similar example would be in your chops what is it, pattern. And that's not random, but it gives me samples in a particular pattern. In this case, a sine. I could change this to a ramp or a triangle. A ramp goes from 0 up to 1 and then back down to 0. Let's put it back on sine, for example. And I can get a particular value out of this by changing the phase parameter, right? So you can see chan1, that's hovering over what value will currently be outputted. And if I slide this phase or even animate it with a Python expression, I can get that value to change. I thought there was a way to do the same thing in noise, but I can't figure out what it is. Period kind of does it, but not really, because it's actually changing the entire data set. So yeah, that's weird. Maybe you use the translate. Yeah, I think maybe you'd use the translate. So if so I can make it slide. If I animated the translate, for example, let's do that. So in the translate TX, if I made that abs time dot frame, then it'll just draw a bunch of random. It'll just that value will be changing, and you can see it going up and down, right? And so I could use that to animate a parameter with a random kind of drunk walk. Does that make sense? It's a little bit weird, I know. You'll get used to it though as you go on.
Is there a way to scrub through values in those number boxes?
Which this?
Like for the translate, like do you have to put in a hard value, or is there a way to like scroll up and down?
Let's find out. I believe you could. Let's take it out of. So right now it's in parameter expression mode. If I wanted it to stop animating, I could click on constant. And then he was talking about scrubbing it manually left and right with like a slider or something. There isn't one here. You could build one as an interface, or if you just want to do the same functionality here in the parameter window, you would probably want to use the value ladder. That's something that works best if you have a mouse. If you don't have a mouse, it's kind of hard to use. The way it works is you click on it and hold, and it brings up this little value ladder. And then, while still holding, move the mouse left and right. This is where it gets really hard on a touchpad. And I can increment by whatever I have set in the value ladder. Right now, I was set to the default of 0.1. We'd probably actually want to change that to like 10 so that it hops a little quicker. And now I can drag that to the right, and you can see it's manually scrubbing through that. Right? So that's kind of what you were talking about, I would think. If I wanted to go back to putting that as an expression, if I just click on the expression tab, it should keep the last Python code that you put in there, or the last expression that you put in there. Let me show you something about this expression. And especially if you're working with Python code, your expression gets too complicated to fit in this small single line. And that happens a lot with Python code, where you want to evaluate the output of this DAT, and based on what whatever this DAT was doing, if it's greater than 5, then do this. If it's less than 2, then do that. You might need to have a longer expression editor than this. You can get to that by doing a Control E on Windows or Command E on Mac, and it will bring up your favorite text program. I like this Text Wrangler program, which has a bunch of stuff built in to identify the style of code you're doing and tell you if you have errors in your code and stuff like that. If you don't have something like that installed, it'll just bring up Notepad, which will work fine. And so I could say, okay, I could edit it here, and I could say I want this to be absolute time.frame times 7. No, actually divided by 3. Otherwise, it'll be way too fast. And I can say save and then close it, and it should update it, although it didn't seem like it did. I've done that before, and it updated it fine, but this time it's not. Maybe if it's not animating, let's just try an expression here. 3 times 6. So now if I go in and open that in an expression editor, and I change that to 3 times 9 and save, then it did update it. I guess because if it was actively animating, maybe, okay. So if it was the absolute time, let me just do an undo, Control Z, absolute time.frame. Maybe if I just pause my pause my playhead and then do the edit, it won't fight me like it did. Times, no, I wanted to do divided by 3. And it says, are you sure? It's being modified. And you say save anyway. Yeah, no, it's because it keeps overwriting it as it goes. So I'll have to look into that particular thing, that particular problem that I'm having. But the idea is still sound that if you put something in here that's not going to fight me like just a regular expression 3 times 2, and I open up the editor, I can change this to something else, 3 times 10, save it, close it, and it's updated it here. I don't know why that wasn't working with absolute time. I'll get back to you on that.
Is that the editor with E?
Yeah. Command E is the, oh, I forgot to turn on my mouse pose so you can see what keystrokes I'm hitting. I'll do that right now. Let's see.
I think we're having trouble on Windows with that. I think it might be because we
Windows people. Let me see. Does that work for anybody else in Mac? Command E, does it open up something?
It does, but it's no way to change what it's trying to.
Let's see. Maybe it's under Preferences in TouchDesigner. That's where I would think it would be. Oh yeah, you don't want to open Xcode. It's got to be here in this somewhere. No, I don't know. Value line, alt, no, middle click. I don't see it. We can do a quick. Let's do a quick Google search on that. TouchDesigner. Toucher. Parameter editor. What did I call it in my notes? What's the official word for it? External editor, right? External. Component editor dialog. Custom parameter section allows you to no, that's not it. I don't know. I'll have to come back to you on that. I don't know where that. I would assume that's in preferences, but I didn't see it there. But there's a lot here. So, whoops, I'm in the wrong things. Preferences, network. Does anybody see anything in the preferences for that? I know it can be set somewhere. I'll have to come back to you on that. So yeah, but you shouldn't need it for a while. So if yours is opening Xcode, I know that takes forever to open and is a big pain. So we'll have to figure that out. So we'll specifically look that up this afternoon, and I'll send you an email. I'll send the class an email. All right. Okay, let's make an LFO chop. LFO is one really easy way to animate these parameters. So like these sample-based chops, if you want it to actually have a parameter that's changing value over time, you have to put that animation as an expression, right, in your in the operator. So in this case, on the phase here, I could say abs time dot frame, and why?
It wants like a 0.1. I was trying to do that. But if you make the numbers super small, then it's not moving fast.
Seconds. Why doesn't that work? It was supposed to work. It's like it doesn't like the number. Okay, so let's do it this way. Abs time, not abs time. Me dot time, is it me dot time dot frame, and have it playing. Oh, maybe you were right. Maybe it was abs time dot frame. Maybe it just had to be playing. No, that's not it. Me dot time dot frame. What am I doing wrong, Shay? You know? How do I make this animate? We were doing it before, and now it's not working. Yeah, I thought so.
Yeah.
Abs
It wants to be between
time dot frame. Yeah, it's the just on the pattern that it doesn't like it. So actually, okay. So me.time.frame is 600. It gets 600 frames, right? 300, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, and then it rolls over. So I could say me.time.frame divided by 600, and that would give me a number between 0 and 1. So that's a way to do it. So yeah. If you want these to animate, you have to do them with expressions. If you want something that just automatically animates, and you don't need anything really complicated like this noise, LFO is the way to go. LFO, low frequency operator. And that just creates, this is a value. By default, it's a sign that goes from -1 to +1, but I can change that to ramp. That goes from 0 to 1 and then back to 0. And so this is like one of the easiest things that you can use to animate something. Let's see. We were going to do this before I ran out of time yesterday. I was going to make the camera on this render move up and down. So go ahead and move your LFO to close to where the camera is. And do we have to go inside? Probably. Maybe not. Let's see. If I change on this camera's component, translate the Y, and I change that from 0 to 4, yeah, it moves it way up. So instead, we'll put it back to 0 if you did, and then change that. Actually, just let's go ahead and try just exporting this. So this LFO to the translate Y. So to get to where the translate Y, you have to click the plus, right? And that gives you all 3 values. And you see TX, TY, TZ. I would then make my viewer active and drag over to the TY and say export chop. And now I'm making the camera move up and then snap back to 0. And I don't like that, so I want it to be more of a sine. So let's just change that to a sine. And now the camera's moving up and down in my render, right? So that was something I was hoping to get to last week, and I was going to put in your homework, but I took it out because we didn't get to it. Yeah, so you can use LFOs to easily animate something, and LFO is generally it's a repeating pattern, right? And you can change the type to different things.
Does it have to be between 0 and 1?
No, it doesn't. So like, if I change it an amplitude of 3, then it's going to output a number between 0 and 3. Or I could take the output and multiply it by something. Actually, let's do this. Let's insert another chop in between the LFO. Oh wait, that doesn't make any sense. Just insert another chop after the LFO and make it. There's one called math. And let's export this to that parameter instead. So go back, get your cam.
No, but hold on a second.
Yeah.
Pull that up. Pull math up so we can see it. Jackson has just displayed why we want to have a null before we export things.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, because if you can put a math between the LFO and the null exports to the CAM, but right now we have to disconnect the export
Right.
before we can reconnect the math.
Right. So, or I could replace it, right? Can I not replace it? Let's find out. I can just replace it. But Shay is right. The best practices, because of this same thing, as I have to go back in and replace it. If I had a null in here, so and I have to remember to do this. I'm still kind of getting used to this because it's something you just don't do in Max and the other things that I'm used to. If I put a null in here, and if I, at the beginning, before I made this LFO, if I had put it to a null, let's go ahead and delete the math for now. And I export the null to the translate Y, export chop. Right? There's the camera moving. Then I can, at will, add as many little objects in between here as I want and take them out as I want without having to do that remove or replace procedure, right? So I can say, let's add a math in here. Thank you for that catch. All right, so we're adding a math. Math has a bunch of different functions. I could here on the multiply, take that range and multiply it by another 3, right? And you can do a multiply, you can add, so multiply it by 2 and subtract 2 by doing a -2 on the pre-add, right? Or even more, I find more useful than this, go ahead and put those back to 0, the ranging feature. So if I have, let's see, if I have this LFO and it's making some values here, and actually change the type back to sine on your LFO, and change the amplitude back to 1. And so now it's making its default of a number that goes between -1 and +1. And here on the math, I can, on that range, I can say, okay, from range to range. The from range is it's going from -1 to +1. And I can output a to range of from -0.2 to +0.2. And why heck isn't it animating anymore? Nulch 3, chan 1. It just stopped. It actually stopped here. Why?
Well, so
oh, there we go.
Rate, yeah.
-0.2 to +0.2. That didn't change it either, though. It's still not animating. This was working before. Channel. Son of a gun. Let me just try this. Maybe we messed up something. Let me just make a new LFO here.
Working for me. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I must have screwed up something in this LFO. Let's just delete that LFO and put a new one in here. Nope, still, then I'll have to get rid of this. All right, that worked. So let's put in our math. All right, that's working. I don't know, that was a bug. So range -1 to +1 and to range. So I don't like how much this is moving, and I just want to do a quick ranging. I can say, okay, I want this to be from -0.2 to -0.2 to +0.2. There we go. And now you can see it's made that movement less, right? Yeah, I could have not used this math. I could have adjusted the parameters of the LFO to do the same thing. but you might be getting a range of numbers from a different channel operator that you can't control, like it's coming from an Arduino or something, and that's just, the Arduino gives you values between 0 and 1024. You can use this math object to range that 1024, 0 to 1024 to a number that goes from -1 to +1. And then when you're using your potentiometer, as you turn the potentiometer, you're moving the thing from the left side of the screen to the right side of the screen, right? So that's why you might use that. Okay, yeah, I don't know what happened there. That was really weird. All right, range, we did that. Any questions on this so far?
So this between like absolute time and mean time.
Okay, so absolute time is the absolute time that has gone by since you started TouchDesigner. Me.time is the internal, each one of these operators has an internal clock, and that has a certain number of samples, and that runs at an independent rate from the play bar down here, right? So yeah, there's different timelines that you can use on different objects. You often don't want your objects to be glued to this play bar or the time code down here, because it doesn't make sense to what you're doing. Like if you're doing with looping videos and you want all of your videos to loop at the same time, then it does make sense to use this reference down here. But if you're just doing like for this noise, you don't care where this play bar is, right? So you create your own absolute time, doesn't reference that play bar. And actually me.time, does me.time does? I think maybe it does. Let's see. Me.time.frame. If I hit pause, it stops. So it's glued, yeah, so me.time is glued to the play bar down here. And you can see these sample numbers. So if I pause here, I'm at 460 or something, 469, yeah, right? So this me.time is glued to this playhead. And if I rewind, then it rewinds that value. But if I want it to be independent from that, I can use absolute time. Dot frame. And then it doesn't even matter. The value will increment even when the playhead isn't moving. That doesn't mean that the objects will necessarily be visually moving. You can see that that is changing, and it will hop to whatever value. It'll hop to it when I hit play. You can see it just jumped to what the new value should have been. So you might still need to make sure that your play is moving, is in the, I mean, that your what do they call this down here? The transport control, that you have play engaged on your transport control to make things move. But this isn't actually tied to where the position is in this looping playhead. Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Let's see. Did that. We did that. Oh, wanted to show you another interesting interesting expression. Okay. So here on number of cycles on this pattern, I'm looking at this pattern sign here. Let's go ahead and name this, rename this, call it sign 1. Okay. And on the number of cycles here, I can make an expression that says me dot digits, and then say plus some amount. Let's say 2. Now, right now that is putting us number of cycles as 3, and we've named this thing sign1. What the me.digits points to is the number that's after the name here. So if I have sign1, it's going 1 plus 2, and that equals 3. I could change this to sign5, and now it's 7. Right? Not sure why you'd use this, but at least it's a good example. So let's get rid of the plus and just say me.digits. And so, well, I guess one interesting way, if you wanted to use a bunch of these different signs and you're just copying and pasting from the previous one, and you wanted each one to have a different number of cycles, you can easily set that just by putting the number here, sign1. Can I do 1.5? Why not? Let's see. No, I can't. All right, sign1, and now it's 1 cycle. And if I copy and paste this, and it's a sign2, and then it has 2 cycles, right? I can't have two of them. The only problem with this is I can't have 2 of them called sign1. So it's not infinitely flexible, but it's a good demonstration of using Python code to do things. Okay, and it's in the first things to know tutorial video too, which is what I based a lot of this stuff off of. All right, yeah. Do we want to do that? No. Command E, and it brings up your expression. Look at this table thing. Okay. All right, let's look at components a little bit. So far we've looked at tops, which are 2-dimensional texture operators, chops, which are data numbers, and you can have various numbers of channels on that. Also, the other thing that's in chops that you can think of as numbers, but we usually don't, is audio. Audio is part of chops because it's a 2-dimensional signal that goes up and down, just like a sine wave, right? So audio is also chops. OSC can be chops. Stuff coming in from your Arduino can be chops. It can also be DATs, but yeah, so they're numbers, right? Question? I thought I heard something. SOPs, again, are surface operators. Those are 3-dimensional Vertex data. What happened to my, it's getting unplugged. My computer's starting to die. Oh, somehow I rolled over it. And, oh, I see what happened. The power strip got moved, or fell off the desk. Let's hope that this works. All right, yeah, so SOPs are 3-dimensional data, and then you have mats are materials, which are usually applied to 3-dimensional objects. I don't know if we've looked at DATs yet. We looked at it quickly just to show this chop2 to actually look at all these values. DATs are tables of numbers that you can either send from a chop to populate that, or you can just create your own table. We'll look at DATs a little bit later, more. And then the other one here is comps, which are components. And then there's 3 families of these comps. The first family we have looked at before is these 3D object stuff like the camera, the geometry, and the light. There's also panels, which are usually used for user interface stuff like buttons and containers for sliders and things like that. And then there's animation, which I think we might get to today, looking at how to use the there's an animation editor where you can set keyframes and make a value slide in different ways between different keyframes. For now, we're going to select, we're going to use containers in the panels family. Okay, so we have a container here. A container is it's an operator that you can use to kind of group things together. Let's see. Yeah, we're going to create this component that has an input and output operator. So we created the container, and now we go inside the container. So remember how to go inside of things? You can just zoom into it and break through the pane into the inside of it, right? And to get out of it, you can zoom out. Another way you can get into it is have the container highlighted and hit enter. That works. And then zoom out. The third way you can do it is have it highlighted and hit I for in. Oaf does not work for out though. It's U for out. I don't know. What do you think U stands for? Up. Up one level. In one level and up one level. Why isn't it D to get in then? Oh well. All right. I mainly just use my scroll wheel to get in and out of things. Okay. One thing to look at here and to know about is this path up here. I mentioned this last week, but this is the absolute path of where you are, right? So slash here, that's your root. Then you're in project 1 and then container 1. If I scroll up, I'm in just project 1. If I scroll up again, I'm in just root, this slash. So go back inside your container 1. And let's see, make a ramp top. Whoa, okay, so that's tiny for some reason. Hit the H key and you can home in on whatever you have. Okay. Did I forget something? No? Okay, and we need an out. We're going to send this out of the component with an out top. And what I should have done instead of doing it this way is right-click on the output and select out from there, and then it will automatically connect those with a wire.
Put a null in.
What?
Put a null in.
And put a null in.
There we go.
So now I have these connected, I can insert a null in between here.
What was the trick for dropping an object and having it already connected to the object?
So you, when you add it, you right-click on the either the input or the output, and it will automatically connect it to either the input or the output. And if you already have this connected to something, it will put something in between those two. If I don't want it to put in between and I want it to branch to a new branch, I can hold down the shift button and then right-click, and I could, I don't know, slope. And now now you can see it's created. If I only have one thing highlighted, you can see it's created a new branch. I don't need this slope, so let's just delete it. I just wanted to show you that.
You can also, if you right-click the
wire, you can say input or insert operator. That's the third way of doing it. Right? We don't want that for now. Okay. So we have this ramp chop, and we did an out top, and then let's see. Oh, we're going to drive this with a chop input. So create a chop, a beat chop. And create a chop in here. So right click on the top inlet on this and create an in chop. Okay. Let's see. Go back outside the component. Oh, I was wrong about this. Sorry. The bead is actually going to be outside of this. Just leave your in chop. We are going to need that. And go outside of the container and create a beat chop here. Beat. And pass that in. Now go back inside of it And you can see that value has passed through to the inlet. Okay, now I'm going to create a null here so I can have the option of adding stuff later. And what are we going to do? We're going to export from this null to the phase parameter of the ramp chop. So highlight your ramp chop, make your null active. Actually, let me show you another way. One of the tutorial guys really likes to do it this way. He likes to right-click on the thing that you're going to export from and open View, and then export directly from that view into where, this way you can take this and have it anywhere in your patch. I can come out of this container and still export it to something here, right? I think that's why that guy likes it. I think it's an extra step, personally, most of the time. But anyway, we're gonna export this to the phase on this ramp. So go ahead and open the phase and drag that over to phase and say export chop. And now we are making that ramp animate. Let's see, scroll out, and you can close this view now if you want. We can actually make this container show us what's happening inside. If we go over to the look panel here and we change the background chop to ./out1. And why? What does that mean? How did I know that other than just getting it from the tutorial? Well, this is a common, this is a address right here. So dot means the current object that you're on, or the current operator. So inside the current operator / there's something called, inside that is something called out1, and that's what we're using. If I scroll in here, there it is, out1 is right here, right? I could also do instead of referencing it that way, I could have referenced it the other way. So if I see here project 1 container 1, I could have done that as well. I could have said /project 1 / container 1 / out1, and that works too, right? To prove it to you, if I change this to something else, it says, hey, I don't know what that is. That's not there, right? So you can call these, you can reference this path in different ways, and it makes sense to do it in different ways under certain circumstances. A lot of times it's just simpler to use those shortcuts like dot / out1, because it's a lot less things to type and a lot less things to keep track of. But if I want to reference, say, a different operator, like, I don't know, circle 1, I could, it wouldn't make sense for this, but just as a reference, I could say /project 1 / circle 1, and it should give me it. Now that's my background top. It's completely confusing because it has, what's going on inside this container has nothing to do with this image, right? But you can set it as any top, and you can set any top by its path, right? And that's the path. So let's put that back to dot / out1, so that we can see what's happening on the inside of this thing. Okay? So yeah, addresses, that's what we've been talking about. We talked about the root, we talked about the slash. We looked at some different forms. It is, okay, great. It's just about time for us to switch over to our fun thing for the day and our homework prep. Render scene with a render top. No, that's all right. Let's stop here. All right, go ahead and save this. And did I forget to make notes for? All right, hold on. Open recent. Class top tutorial. Just let me look at this really quick because I forgot to put this in my notes. So I just need to refresh my memory. So go ahead and make a new patch once you've saved your old one. So we're going to do this, which kind of creates some liquid video that kind of moves around in a two-dimensional, trippy manner. Yeah, it's an acid trip. All right, so just let me look at this really quick. Okay, so we have a video. What?
You're using live video.
Yes, I'm using live video. Yeah. So ramp, blur. Okay, ramp 3. That I'm not using. That was from an example. Video in. Okay, no, it's just this stuff over here, and then the. Okay, great. I remember now. Displace. Yeah, and noise, and animate the noise through the Z parameter. Yes. Okay, great. So let me see. So we have a blank canvas. Let me save as for this. Top tutorial class. Okay. Let's start with a movie file in top. Okay. And let's also add a ramp top. Okay. Ramp tops, you can see by default it gives you this is a texture ramp as opposed to a chop ramp. So a chop ramp goes from 0 to 1 on numbers. A texture or top ramp goes from 0 to 1 on pixel values. And that could be 0 to 1 in just black and white, or it could be 0 to 1 in different colors. You can change the way it does that by type here. So right now it's set on horizontal. I can change that to vertical. I can change it to radial, which goes from 0 to 1 around in a rotational circle. And one of my favorite is actually called circular, which kind of creates this circular gradient where it's either white in the center and goes out to black, or black in the center and goes out to white. You can change this the way it, the extend left and extend right. I can change this from repeat to hold, and then it will just go and hold that. Once it gets to 1, it doesn't start moving a different way. It just holds that value. You could have it do mirror, so it starts to go back down to 0 as you go past 1. You can have it repeat, where it snaps back to 0 and then starts building back toward 1. For now, it doesn't really matter. Just leave it on the default or whatever you have it on. Yeah, I think the default is repeat. Okay. We can change this to a color, for example. So right now, the way the ramp works is what is stored up here in this gradient bar here. And there are 2 keyframes here, one at the beginning and one at the end. And these are the different colors that it will be ramping between. I can add more keyframes just by clicking on this. And so I can add a keyframe here, and instead of it being black, I want it to be red or something. And so I set this to red. What? It's still black. It's because the saturation is down all the way by default. So if I turn up the saturation, now it's a dark, dark red. Well, now I can adjust the value and make it a saturate red. And so now it's ramping between black and red, and then between red and white. I can change this to a different color. I can add another keyframe here and put in a different color and change my saturation up and my value to 1. And let's add one more color and make this like a blue. Make my saturation up. And now it's making these cool, weird circles. And let's go back and change the extreme ends. From instead of being black and white, let's make them some other color. And this one at the end. So you can select, you can either, if you click on the gradient, it'll add a keyframe. If you click on the keyframe, it'll edit the keyframe. All right, so instead of this going to white, I'm going to have it go to another color. There we go. So now I have this crazy, colorful circle thing. Okay, I can composite these if I want. There's multiple different compositing tops. One of the most common ones is called over. And that will put whatever you put into the top inlet over whatever you put in the bottom inlet. And so now I have a banana in front of this circle gradient. But it's warped it to fit the aspect ratio of this ramp 1. And it's because this ramp 1 is actually outputting, if you click on your middle button, it'll tell you what its size is. Or if you don't have a mouse, you can click over here and click the input or info button. You can it'll tell you what its size is. It's 256 by 256, so it's a square raster. And this is a 16 by 9 raster. So that's what's kind of confusing it, because the over has to choose one of them, right? So we can change the parameters of the over. I can, for example, on this pre-fit overlay, I can change that to native resolution, which will keep the banana at its native resolution, which is 1280 by 720, and this one at its native resolution, which is 256 by 256, and then consequently it zooms the banana way in. Justify, where is it now? Fixed layer, input 2. I can change this to input 1, and now it's basing it off of the banana's native resolution and just putting a small circle thing behind it. Or I can change this pre-fit overlay back to fill, and now it's stretching that ramp to fit the aspect ratio of the banana. What happens if I say fit best? Then it fits the best it can for that thing. But I'm never going to be able to get these to match up perfectly unless I make them have the same aspect ratio, right? At least. You can't just make them the same resolution too. So one way to do that is to go into the common parameter on your ramp and change this to a value that would equate to 16 by 9. In this case, let's just make it the same as the banana, which is 720p, which is 1280 by 720. So let's just make this ramp have 1280 by 720. And now they look good because they have the same aspect ratio. In fact, they have the same resolution. Okay. One thing to keep to remember is that TouchDesigner limits you to only 1280 by 1280 pixels if you're using the free version. So you can't do 1080p output. You can't do 1920 by 1080. But you can do 720p, which from 10 feet back, there's really no difference unless you have a really big monitor. Okay, so that's one way of compositing. Another way, and that's the simplest way. Another way is to do like composite, for example, and I can go ahead and send the banana down here. The composite can take as many sources input as you want. Go Go ahead and take the ramp down here. And now it composites them in some manner. And by default, it's multiply. And so it's multiplying the banana by this ramp. And so you get this kind of multicolored banana. I can change that to color. And then it kind of does that. I can change it to dodge. You know, you can just play around and get some different things. Let's go ahead on this ramp. Let's go ahead and animate this ramp. And how did I do that before? It's going to be the phase number here, right? So if I drag this phase, you can see if hopefully there's no epileptics in here. But yeah, you'll see it animate, right? So let's go ahead and tie that to some Python code. What do you think I should put there on the phase to make it move Python-wise? We've done it already today. Abs time dot frame. Abs time dot frame. Why? What? Why is that going so slow? Seconds. There we go. That's better. Abs time dot seconds. But it's too fast. So let's divide that by 5. Now it goes 1/5 as fast. So we have some really trippy, a really trippy banana here. Okay. Wanted to show you how to do that liquid video. So that's one kind of compositing. Here's one kind of compositing. This is a different kind of compositing. Let's see. Why would you, the other thing you can do with this, will somebody fix that?
Oh, wait, that's my job.
The other thing you can do with this is I could have more than one over compositing here. Let's make another one. And make another movie file in. And change this to a different image, like the butterfly. And send this into input 1 and the other one into input 2.
Will everybody on that be okay if I unplug you for a hot second? Yes?
Yeah.
Yes? Okay, great.
Okay, so I can composite in multiple layers like this. You're like, well, why would you do that? Because this comp can actually take as many inputs as you want. Well, aside from these being different types of compositing, which they don't have to be actually, I can change this to, if I change this to, is there alpha? Alpha top. Oh, weird. That's cool. But the one thing about this comp is like I couldn't reposition each one of these elements. I could only reposition the entire thing composited together. If I'm doing it in different layers like this, I could move the moth down, for example. So I could say, yeah, put this 0.3 up. And now I can move it independently of the layer below it, right? So you can use a bunch of different compositing things to establish layers and adjust those layers independently. Instead of this movie file in top, actually, let's make another ramp. So duplicate the ramp, copy and paste the ramp. And, oh man, we're running out of time. All right, never mind. Let's not do this. Let's just move straight to that liquid video part. All right. So we want to do that by creating some noise, a noise top, which kind of creates a cloud. It's random values that go between 0 and 1. There are different types of noise you can choose from here. you probably want to create your noise on one of these GPU options. Otherwise, you're going to have frame rate issues really quickly. You can see already, before we've done anything, we're already below 60 frames. We're at 58, 59. At least I am. I don't know. You guys might have a better computer than I do. But choose one of these noises from the GPU and make sure it's a 3D noise. So choose Perlin 3D or Simplex 3D. What's the difference? Not much. Yeah, let's do Perlin 3D for now. Okay? And we don't need this much variation. We actually want this to be a little bit simpler. So let's see. I think if I adjust the period, it kind of zooms it in. And I can make that even further, like 6. That's probably closer to what I want. And I can, let's see, what was it that I did? Is it, oh, it's in the transform. That's right. Click over on the transform tab up here. And what we're going to do is we're going to make this, we're going to translate this through on the Z scale. So here on transform Z, click on your expression mode. And let's do our abs time dot frame. Whoa, not frame, dot seconds. There we go. And that's kind of fast even, so let's divide that by 3. And so now you have this kind of nebulous cloud here. And we're going to use this actually as a displacement raster for a displaced top. And we need a piece of content to go into that, and we might as well use a video device in, which should default to your camera. And if you have your playhead turned on, you should see yourself in the camera image. So go ahead and send that to the first inlet of the displace, and it's still mad at me because I don't have the second inlet, and send the noise to the second inlet. Yeah. Now we're talking. And so you can play around with the parameters of this to get some really interesting ones. One thing I like, what was it? How did I do that before? There was something I did that changed the way it was working, but I don't know, whatever, doesn't matter. And then, yeah, we're out of time now anyway. So now you can composite this with the background. Now there was a way I was doing this before that, oh, one thing I can do here on the noise is turn off monochrome, and now you get independent noise in different colors, and it's the colors here that are driving it, the displacement. It says its horizontal source is red and its vertical source is blue. Otherwise, if you just had it monochrome, then all of those values, the red, the blue, and the green, are the same because it's going between white and black. So then you'll be always displacing the same direction on the two values. So I like to do it this way with the color. And there was one other thing, and I can't remember. Oh, that's it. On the extend here on the displace, change that to 0, which then values that go beyond the maximum displacement become transparent. And now I can composite this with my trippy ramp over here. And we can just do that with an over. No, not pack. Over. And I want this to be the top layer and the ramp to be the bottom layer. And that's essentially what I had at the beginning. Not quite as, it's not going to work in perform mode unless I put an out. So you want to put an out on your, actually, before you put an out, or if you've already connected them, you can just insert in between. Put a null here. That way, we can always have a null at the end of the chain. And we can insert as much as things as we want here. Now, if you have the out, the top out, then if you go into perform mode, you can see the frame rate will hop up significantly. Okay, so we're out of time now, but I want you to do something like this or different, but using the same sort of things in your homework. Let's take a look at what I put on the website. So for next week, create a TouchDesigner network that deforms or moves 2D tops. You can use camera in like we did, video device in. You can also use a movie in and use a movie that's on your hard drive. Mix at least 3 top generators such as movie file in, ramp top, circle top, rectangle top, right? We looked at circle top. There are some other ones that are like rectangle to make a square shape. Right? And I can change the size of this in different ways. Pass the image through at least 3 filters. They can be different stream. And then composite. What do I mean by filters? Like blur. We've used one filter we used is this displace. That's a filter. I can also have like blur is another filter. So anything in this list that's tops that is dark is a generator. It's something that either creates a signal or reads it from a file. And anything that's light is a filter, right? So go through here and find a filter that you like the way it works. There are some that are really easy to use, like blur is a good example. Where's blur? Yeah, right here. So I can pass, whoops, what I should have done actually is just right here, this. I can insert an operator and put in blur. Where did it go? Just start typing blur. There it is. And now if I change the filter size up, it'll start blurring it, as you can see. That's not enough. I can go beyond it by typing in a value. Now it's blurry. Right? I don't really like that, so I'm gonna get rid of it. I can bypass it. There's one way to get rid of it, or I can just delete it. But in your assignment, use at least 2 different filters. Between 3 different filters. I'll make that 2 different filters. 2 different filters and 2 different composite to at least 2 different tops any way you want. You can use the composite top, you can use the over top, and there's some other ones in there too that you can find. And then animate at least 1 parameter using chop, using a chop export, and animate chop export. Let's see, I said I'm going to change that from 3 filters to just 2. Yeah, and then animate at least 1 parameter using a Python expression like abs_time or me.time. And then make sure your network will output in performance mode, and all you have to do there is just make sure you have an out top at the end of your top chain. Okay? And then make a video of it, put it on your blog. All right? Any questions on the homework? Cool. All right, guys, thanks.
Send an email out to everyone right